Tell you what, I think I need to go to the restroom and get that.
Okay, this is David Crosby, and I'm at the home of John and Margrit Garner in Jackson, Mississippi. Today is March the 28th, 2015, and I'm here to interview the two of them about their associations with and participation in the activities of Wells Methodist Church as part of the Wells Church Oral History Project. John and Margrit, do I have your permission to conduct this interview?
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Thank you very much. John, I'd like to just begin by asking you to describe what your situation was when you first became aware of Wells Methodist and what it was about Wells that caught your interest.
I think I should defer to Margrit because she was more the prime mover in that area.
Okay, well that's great.
Okay. First, when we came to Mississippi, he decided we go to Galloway Church. He says, we live in a black college and we need to cross over, building bridges. And Galloway Church is the largest church, that's where we can make a difference, okay?
Largest Methodist church.
Yeah, largest Methodist. So we went for a few years and we got children. And then I also had multicultural children. Black, biracial children that nobody wanted through the welfare department. Yeah, that started to be a little bit problematic for that church. And then when my children were 10 and 12, we went to Switzerland. In Switzerland, during the summer, we talked about, and I made it clear that I would like a church to find in Jackson, Mississippi, that what they preach, they act. That is not preaching one thing and in their life living a different life. So when we came back in 1974, we did literally, the rest of the summer, church hunting. We just visit churches, came home, discussed over lunch hour, hey kids, what do you like, and so on. And making a long story short, we come to Wells. John said, kids, do you remember? There was no Sunday school class. They had not really anything for the children. And Stephen looked at his sister, who was 2 years younger, so he was about 12 and she was 10. Do we really need a Sunday school? And Stephen, big mouth, I understood what he said. Sister, did you understood what he said? Oh yeah. So their family decided to go to Wells.
Very good.
Now you can hopefully pick up a little.
Well, I think that was pretty well the decision.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking it involved the 3 black foster kids we had in terms of the transition from Galloway to Wells.
I didn't want to
raise that
mark
issue.
Galloway Church too negatively.
Okay.
I mean, you were arrested to Galloway certain things, and I supposed to have brought for those foster children each time a health certificate. And I said, if you require from every child that goes to Galloway Church a health certificate, I will obey too, otherwise I won't. But anyway, we were accepted with the way we were as a family, with different children. And the hardest group we had at that time were 3 children, 9 months and then 18 months, and the 3.5 was about of a few months level, severely abused and neglected. And after a while I had them, I felt I can take them. But I knew they would cry and yell and scream. And the nursery at Wells Church and the staff said, Margrit, you go in with John and your children and just relax. They will be all right. And they really helped a lot. Then individual member helped me sometime, took them on a Saturday, so I would have a Saturday with my pre-teenage children, a little bit the weekend. So from that moment on, Wells Church was very supportive of our situation, and that's what I basically looked at.
I see. Let me just try to sort out a couple of things. What year did you first come to Mississippi? and what brought you here?
I guess we came in the winter of '62.
Summer.
We first came on a bus from the University of Illinois to Jackson.
Hmm. Was that part of the Freedom Riders?
Well, not really, although it kind of it was traumatic for me to move from an integrated bus to a segregated bus where you either had to go into the white waiting room and participate in the system, or go in the black waiting room and get arrested, or stay on the bus and risk disaster, shall we say.
But the purpose, John, for that trip was, let me help you quick, was to get the interview with the president. There was not an opening. And you pulled that little catalog at the University of Urbana out and say, look now, Tougaloo College, private Negro college at that time called, basically, don't even have a physics department. It's about time when the Negro don't just preach and teach and dance, they need physics, they need science to help their whole community. So we just went on the bus to Tougaloo. And then John was approved, and we came in summer of 1962, where you just after you graduated started the summer.
So they had a summer science program. I started teaching.
Yeah.
I finished my master's on a Friday and started at Tougaloo the following Monday.
Wow.
It was a quick transition.
So it was the two of you then,
Yeah.
alone on the bus,
Yeah.
and confronted with the peculiarities of Southern segregation
Yeah.
when you arrived in Jackson.
Yeah. To give it a little more detail, on the bus, somehow we got talking to an African American woman. And the three of us got off the bus and started to walk to the white waiting room
In Jackson.
in Jackson. And the cop stopped us and said, "You guys can go in, but she can't." Right at that moment, the president's wife, president from Tougaloo, the wife of the president of Tougaloo, Mrs. Beidel, came, grabbed the three of us and said, "Oh, here you are, my children," and hustled us away.
I mean, she was taller than I am and very slender. And here you must think, this police, the black lady was in the middle, pushed basically his body against her. And Mrs. Beidel, I mean, ignored the whole powerful guy and literally armed, "Oh, here are you, my three children." And then, "John, you could have been just arrested before you had a final interview with my husband. And ma'am, where are you going? Can I take you?" That was the introduction to Mississippi.
So she was a take charge kind of person.
Can you imagine? And I was thinking, what actually did the cop do after that? I have no idea. I think he was so stunned.
Hmm.
Well, we left, so
It wasn't his problem anymore.
Yeah, right. He had, yeah.
Well, that was an abrupt introduction to Mississippi then.
Yes, it was a little.
So you began teaching at Tougaloo, and that's when you started going to Galloway United Methodist
Yes.
in the real downtown area by
Yeah. Right.
Smith Park. Kind of
Yes.
thing.
Right. Yeah. And we were in a Sunday school class, and it was. We met and made some very good friends that we still have there,
Mhm.
but there was some racial tension.
But mention in what class did we got stuck in? We didn't realize till later. They usually newly married put them in a newly married class, and they put us in class with Millsap's professor, Dr. Bergmark, Libel, Dr. Rife, Dr. T.W. Lewis, and all. So after a few weeks, we figured it out why.
Could you put that into words? What did you figure out?
First of all, I first said, yeah, John is a kind of in the teaching possession, and they are in a teaching possession, so we have something in common. Later, a little bit, they didn't want it to upset. It was brought to my attention. Those young couples and some women were pregnant. And when we talked racial issues, they thought we would be too disturbing for the young couple.
I
That
see.
the other
Mhm.
people could handle us better.
So that they kind of segregated you into the academic circle at the church and away from the young people's section. Is that
That's
essential?
kind of,
Yeah, uh-huh.
You know, they tried to work it.
All right.
And Wells Church, you know, there was, as of today, suits, blue jeans, shorts, who cares?
Mm-hmm. Well, was that about the time when African Americans in Jackson were testing the boundaries of segregation in the churches and visiting the Sunday services to be admitted, and some of them being turned away?
Yeah, that was the time. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That was after the time.
It was, after it began. We had Tougaloo. We used to. There were. I don't know whether we were the only people organizing those visits, but we were certainly involved. I mean, say we, I mean people at Tougaloo.
Mm-hmm.
And but this was before Wills, so I'm not sure.
Right.
Do we want to discuss this?
Well, I mean, in some ways it's relevant because of the. I've just popped out of my head the name of that. The document that the Methodist ministers signed, the
one that
Born
Keith-
of Conviction.
Born of Conviction statement, yes.
Statement.
Keith signed, yes.
that Keith signed, who was, of course, the pastor at Wells. He was not at that time. He was down on the Gulf Coast still, but he had signed that, and that was really a response to the treatment that African American families were getting at some of the churches in Mississippi.
Yeah,
right.
we have two examples, and if you then want, you could go and get our newsletter from the Mississippi Archive. All this is written up. John took one time a Tougaloo student with him, and as a side comment, I have to say, we were by our friends strictly informed. Margrit, when you think John and you are going to be in danger, one of you have to stay at home with you at that time, Stephen, because they have a law. You will do, whoever did something in their eyes wrong, considered communist, and then you are unfitted to be a parent, and then the child will be removed. So when John took this student from Tougaloo, Joyce Ladner, to Sunday school, I stayed at home with Stephen. And it was not even church, and it had the Sunday school had a separate entrance. Now you may not remember, when you entered with Joyce, the Sunday school.
We got about 3 feet inside the door before we were stopped. There were some members of the Sunday school class who were opposed to integration, and one of them stopped us, and then they called I guess the church authorities or something, and who called the cops, and we got arrested and taken to jail. I was fortunate that my father paid my bail so I could get out and teach class on Monday. Joyce Ladner was not well. She stayed in till the following Friday in jail. Bail was $1,000, which we never were able to get back. Charges were disturbing divine worship and trespass, which always puzzled me. Because we were members of Galloway, how could I trespass in the church of which I was a member was a little bit of a puzzle. But it may be an illustration of how...
Maybe it was conspiracy to commit trespass.
I don't know, whatever.
But then another case, and then we can jump to the broader, is a Presbyterian minister teaching on Tougaloo College wanted to go with his wife and the baby on the highway to the Presbyterian church, and they were stopped by cars, cut off, and then with metal pipe hit the front and so on. They were really scared and they moved. out of all these, you may have heard, then we had ministers coming down, black and white ministers, to the churches to test the waters, and they got arrested.
This was people from the north who came down?
Northern minister. And one time even a bishop came, remember?
Bishop and white and black bishop were arrested together.
And they
at
make
Gallup.
joke and said, yeah, anybody can wear a collar, indicating this cannot be a bishop, those black cannot be,
That could not be official clergy or something like that.
So they were stationed, everything was stationed at Tukulum, and at my house they slept and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to push the envelope. And as I said, to me, it was not so much the safety. To me, it was really, this is no longer, for me, a Christian church. That I can raise my family. It was not just because of my foster children. It was just even for me. I could not.
Mm-hmm.
Accept that. Unfortunately, it has changed.
So that commitment to racial equality and social justice you see as a part of your religious commitment as well.
Yeah, but you must think, I was raised in Second World War, and I often think why I felt so strong. I was 5 when the war broke out, 10 when the war was over. And I remember very early, I was in kindergarten, so I was 6 or 7. At the dinner table, my mother and my father, we were 2 girls, said, now look, we need to tell you, I am not going to put the, what is that called? The cross? Swastika on the roof. I will not put the flag out. If Hitler march into Switzerland, you have to be very, very careful. You will never see me again, and you have to do A, B, C, D, and then comes the little pack sack every night with food, all the shutters down, no lights, nothing, the whole town, all the whole smear full of them. And I think that my father, so early, then later we talked about, obviously, too, that he was willing to give his life, but he would not say Heil Hitler. Mm-hmm. Even so, if he would have said Heil Hitler, then we would have had a free education, we would have wonderful lives. Okay. I think maybe there was something planted, I don't know.
Well, certainly the idea that principles are very important, and you don't accommodate people who violate those principles. Sounds like what you're saying. I don't want to overinterpret here.
And you came from back after college, you went to Africa, you saw Johannesburg, and that injustice, and he wanted first to go back to Johannesburg, and then his father said, you barely know each other, why don't you build a strong marriage, go to this country can use you, and that's how we ended up in Mississippi.
So you were in Europe, and
he was after college, Africa, Turkey, and then Lebanon in an ecumenical work camp. And I met him at that ecumenical work camp in Byblos, Beirut.
I see. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to go back to Africa?
That was my plan.
Uh-huh.
I'd been to the Union of South Africa and saw apartheid for a few weeks, and thought maybe I'd go back and see if there's some commitment I could make there. But it turned out that we came to Toulouse instead.
Mm-hmm. So you discovered there were ways to address those kinds of issues here in the United States without going to Africa. Mm-hmm. Where do you think Margrit, you've described your experience with your family in the Second World War and how that contributed to your sense of a commitment. I wondered, John, growing up in Illinois,
in an
affluent North Shore community, what first got you moving in that direction?
Well, my father, I guess I'm not sure. It's kind of a puzzle, but my father always said you treat people on the basis of who they are, not the class they belong to, or anything like that. So he made it pretty clear that he felt that people should be treated as individuals and not on the basis of skin color or economic level.
And
that may have been it. I'm really kind of puzzled where that commitment came from.
mm-hmm.
His father was poor, his family, second oldest of 11, and he had a hard life. And the way they lived, I mean, when I met, they had big garden, vegetable garden work. The boys had to help him installing this wash machine or clothes wash or anything. They did not live as you may think, that type of life in Wilmette. His wife, I mean, here I was clothes design and sewing and all. I have never sewed a winter coat with also lining and all, and she and her sister sewed winter coats and for themselves and the children. So they lived in Wilmette because of a solid education system. That's what Dad always told me. That attracted him. But they did not live the life of the average Wilmette person. And these boys went, and this girl went raised that way.
Sounds like they tried to live a very self-sufficient kind of existence, making for themselves rather than...
To some extent.
Mm.
That Mom did a lot of canning. We did gardening. We did...
It's a short growing season up there.
I remember we... for example, we used to grow carrots and save them in a bucket of sand during the winter time, so you could use them then. So they practiced many of the more traditional.
It's something that my wife probably could sympathize with, because her grandfather had a huge garden in Cincinnati, downtown Cincinnati, and produced a lot of truck farm kinds of vegetables and sold them around the neighborhood, in fact. So she comes from the same kind of background where you produce.
Yes, right.
Exactly.
You just learn things like, going out and digging carrots, digging beets, husking corn, all those kinds of activities that are part of that whole process.
Well, now most kids think that corn comes in a freezer.
A can or something, I don't know what.
Well, you went to New Trier High School, which is, at that time especially, was a renowned academic high school in the North Shore. You were in one of the STEM disciplines, physics, math.
Well, I think the high school was, I wasn't aware of being in a STEM curriculum. It was a broad curriculum. I
college
guess
prep
curriculum.
Yeah,
college prep, and I probably knew that math was kind of my favorite subject. I don't know. I can't remember whether we had physics. We may have. And it was just the school everybody went to. You didn't really know that it was a good school or a poor school. It was the school.
Mm-hmm.
Turned out it was a very good school, but as a child, or at least I as a teenager, wasn't really cognizant of that. You just went where everybody else went.
And did you go straight from New Trier to the University of Illinois?
No, I went to...
Carleton College.
Yeah, Carleton College, yes. Straight from... went to Carleton, yes.
And there you majored in physics.
I had a double major in physics and math.
And did you know that you wanted to be a teacher by that point?
I don't remember whether I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I think I found that out in graduate school when I was a teaching assistant.
Mm-hmm.
I preferred teaching over research.
Now, at some point, apparently, you became involved with an ecumenical group that took you to Africa and Turkey and the Levant, and I'm wondering how that got started.
Well, that's an interesting journey. In about, I would say, sophomore or junior year of high school, which would have been 53, 54, something like that. At that time, my parents were Congregationalists. And, Congregational church was one of the components of the founding of Tougaloo back in the late 1860s, 1869. And I went to my high school Sunday school group, and there was this visitor. Turned out he was a Tougaloo English teacher, red-headed guy, and I have never been able to identify him. And he talked about Tougaloo and teaching there, and that kind of piqued my interest. So maybe that's when I first learned about or thought about teaching. I don't really know. And that's where I first learned about Tougaloo. Margrit mentioned finding this Tougaloo catalog, a tiny catalog, and at that point I was interested possibly in teaching in Tougaloo. So it came from that religious component, and the Congregationalists were also related to the whole, I guess you might say, the worldwide Christian relationship. So they knew, for example, I was a what they call an educational missionary when I went and taught in Turkey, and it was through their connections with the church at large that I got to go to South Africa, because it was the church, the missionaries that were there who guided me around Cape Town and Johannesburg and showed me the various parts. And
they had a purpose. What did they build, John?
Well, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
I don't think. And through the religious contacts, I became aware of, and so my year in Turkey and that summer in part of which was in South Africa was certainly church related. My senior year in college, senior year at Carleton, there was this guy who came through. He was looking for students to participate in a work camp in Africa. His name was Axel Nelson, and it turned out he was I'm not sure he was quite a missionary, but he was an advisor to the Wameru people in what was then Tanganyika, is now Tanzania. And I guess part of that, my interest was, and I joined that work camp. So after I had spent about 3 weeks in South Africa, then I went to East Africa, and we did this. We started building the first African-owned coffee factory in Tanganyika. And it actually turned out that it was illegal. We almost got turned away at the border because it was illegal for Africans to process coffee. It was part of the colonialist structure. When I arrived a little earlier than most of the group because I came from, South Africa, and they were coming from the States. When I got off the plane in Nairobi, they said, "You're persona non grata, you got to get back on the plane." That was a shock for a young guy who had a visa, and they said, "Well, we can still reject you." But it turned out the government had changed their mind.
So this is the British colonial administration?
Yes, this was Britain. They colonialized that eastern part of Central Africa, I think Kenya, Uganda, Tanganyika, those three countries, I believe, are British ruled. So a lot of folks spoke some English as a result.
Yeah.
That helped a lot.
If you're a missionary to that part of Africa, are you a missionary to black Africans or to colonial
Africans.
administrators?
Well, he was Axel Nelson was, his focus was on the black Africans. That may be another example of trying to straddle the two. I don't know. I just don't know enough about what he did.
Yeah, I'm just curious about whether you're Christianizing the pagans or the Christians.
Good question. I mean, what we did was, just labor.
Right, I understand that.
We didn't proselytize. Well, speaking for myself, I didn't proselytize. I just,
right.
tried to get the job done.
You were there to create some possibilities for people to
Yes, I guess so.
get something.
It was an
positive
example
done.
of service.
Yeah. Well, maybe we need to bring it back to Mississippi. You had some problems at Galloway because of the civil rights agitation that was going on at the time. That's when you began shopping around for another church, is that?
We came to Galloway. Well, we were Methodists at the University of Illinois. Okay, we were pretty comfortable. Margrit I think she was pretty comfortable with Methodism as she experienced it there. So when we came to Mississippi, we just stayed Methodist, and then we chose Galloway for the reasons Margrit has discussed, and just our very presence at Galloway was tough on some people.
So how long did that process last? As you experienced this at Galloway?
Well, we joined Galloway immediately when we came, didn't we?
In 1962, and we went to Switzerland in 1974. That summer we left. In summer of 1974 we left. So 12 years.
I see.
10, 12 years.
You stuck it out there for that long?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure sticking it out is quite the right term. Because there were some, as I said, we made some great friends. This Sunday school class, of which we remember, was had some real tension in it, but I don't know, I guess maybe I'd gotten used to living with it to some extent. And after I got arrested and so on, I just went back to church, and there was some sense, I think, of or some semblance of acceptance on behalf of some people. I did. I ushered a couple of times at Galloway, and different people. When Sela resigned from the pulpit at Galloway, that was the first day that anybody had been turned away. That was a very powerful symbol. And when I'm trying to remember the name of his successor. He wrote a book called Cunningham. Yeah, I think Reverend Cunningham wrote a book later about Agony at Galloway. That was the title of the book. There was a definite struggle going on in the church over race. But I didn't feel rejected. Maybe I was just kind of oblivious to it. As I say, some people were very accepting, other people were not so happy about our presence.
So you left in '74 to go to Switzerland for a very long time, or?
No, I thought you didn't teach. I worked in the summer, so we probably stayed in Switzerland for 4, 5, 6 weeks. Staying with my parents and traveled,
I see.
And then we came back and had now a little bit time before he had to start again to teach in fall. And during that time, I guess, we visit different churches, and Bell's church clicked, and Keith was there, And it was a different church at that time than it's now. I mean, as I say, not so children or youth group or so on. And I don't think, was Keith the only minister? I think. I try to remember. Later we had sometimes assistant minister, and it was in the city, and I just felt everybody was welcome. And another thing is, we didn't have to pledge for money. So that already, I felt I was in a church and not in a club. You know, I could not have this pledge business and all that.
Well, that is a sticking point for people sometimes, no matter what congregation you belong to. But you found Keith's church exceptional in that regard, that they didn't badger you for money.
That was certainly a plus for us, yes.
Well, your children were born here in Mississippi then?
Actually, Stephen was born here in '64. I went to Brown for a year to see if I wanted to continue studying physics, which I decided against. And Evelyn was born in Providence, Rhode Island.
I see, okay.
But they both have basically grown up in Mississippi.
So you were taking them to church during this period as well?
No.
Yeah, just the
All
normal
the time.
thing, right?
No problem.
So
I can't remember what Sunday school class did they go into at
They had more like, I don't know what they really taught, but a little Bible story and singing.
Okay.
well, I talked with Betty Quinn not too long ago, and she was a Sunday school teacher at Galloway. And so maybe your kids encountered her at one time, or no?
No, never. She was a younger person. I kind of visualized, but I can't remember her name. And
So Betty taught Sunday school at Galloway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that.
And she said in their Sunday school classes they had. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to say that. She also was a teacher at Galloway School, which was a public school. And in their classes, she said they had an integrated classroom. They had both African Americans and whites in their classroom at that time.
That had been 1970.
Yeah, it was very. It was during that freedom of choice period
Yeah.
there between 65 and 70, say. And then when the big move came in 70, that stopped. But anyway, that's a connection. She's currently, of course, a member of Wells Church.
So she was talking about teaching at Galloway School, not teaching at Galloway Church.
Well, I think she did both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I was trying to sort it out in my mind as I was
have to
talking.
ask her that.
Yeah. What kinds of activities other than worship service did you get involved in at Wells, if any?
In the very young years, none, except just Sunday school and church, because with my involvement during the week we were busy, and John teaching, and then all his political up in Madison County and all that. There we didn't. The only thing I started to think you got involved was actually when Katrina hit.
Uh-huh.
That recently, huh?
Because you must realize he had a full teaching load.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived on campus, and John and us teachers, that's what made Tougaloo so strong, and we had such Judge Reuben Anderson at Colonialism. Those students knew if they have a problem, they can call, ring the doorbell. Most professors had to live on campus for safety reasons. Can ring the doorbell, 1, 2, 3 a.m., doesn't matter. And they get help and so on. So on committee meeting and fundraising. So the job as a Tougaloo teacher was enormous. And then being a part of an important movement with the democratic school integration, that's what he was. Then they had training on a Friday night or Saturday, so you could go up to those families who had the kids put in a white school so the father can sleep and doesn't have to stand with the gun on the front porch. So then Tuvalu professors, so never had a gun, but they had to learn how to use it.
I had a 22.
So to go and up into Madison County and stay overnight, mostly Friday night and Saturday, to guard so those people, those family can once get to sleep and don't have to do the guarding themselves. And then also the meeting and the planning, he was always gone.
How did that come about, John, your involvement with school integration and so on in Madison County?
In '64, there was the challenge by the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. They wanted to be seated in place of the regular Democrats. And Ed King was very heavily involved in that, and he was the chaplain at Tuvalu. He was, I think, they had a ticket of
the Freedom Democratic Party.
Right. They since they couldn't attend the precinct caucuses and everything of the regular Democrats, they created their own structure, and he was the candidate for lieutenant governor, if I remember right. Aaron Henry was the candidate for governor, and
were you a member of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party?
I'm not sure that that party really was. Well,
you had a membership.
Yeah, right.
They didn't have membership. I only know he acted as a secretary.
Yeah.
I see.
I became involved with Madison County. Each county is supposed to have an executive committee, so we needed to form a Madison County executive committee. And I got involved in that and served as the secretary for, I guess, I didn't get involved in '64. It was more like '66 by the time I got involved. I knew about '64, but I really wasn't involved at all. And then we had regular meetings and so on, and I did the minutes and all that. I became the secretary. And then when it became time to elect officials to go towards 68. This was not 64, but 68. You have a precinct caucus, then you have a county convention, then you have a convention of the district, meaning the district, everybody who's from whatever district it is that has
congressional
to
district.
the congressional district, right? And then you go from there to the state meeting, and I started as the secretary of the Madison County Executive Committee, was chosen as the secretary of the district, then was chosen as secretary of the state. And as a result of that, went to the 68 and 72 Democratic conventions. And, 68 was the time when the regulars and the loyalists, the Freedom Democrats, both went again. In 64, the Freedom Democrats there was a big fight, and the Freedom Democrats were basically rejected. They gave the option of 2 at-large seats, I think, but they rejected that compromise, and the traditional Democrats were seated.
Right.
But there was pretty much a pledge at that point to not seat any, in the future, not seat segregated delegations. So when we came in 68, there was still a competition between the regulars and the Freedom Democrats, but this time the Freedom Democrats were seated and the regulars went home. In 72, the 2 groups merged. And at that point, my activities pretty much ceased.
I see. Yeah, I was at the '68 convention too. Not at the convention. I was in Grant Park, but
Was
you
it
were in Grant
candlelight?
Park.
Yeah. it was it was a strange time.
Yeah.
It was a strange
Well,
time.
I was in one of those marches.
Yeah.
Well, I have the picture of this candlelight night.
Yeah.
This is an aside, but have you ever seen the movie Medium Cool?
No.
Well, you must see it. It's about the '68 convention.
Yeah.
By Haskell Wexler is the director.
Uh,
But anyway, so that was keeping you busy, and but basically you felt you found a place at Wells where you could simply be accepted for who you were and not have the same kinds of tensions that you had experienced before.
I don't think that there was tension. I acknowledged the tension, but I was kind of oblivious to it at the same time. Maybe you have to be. And there were some folks who were very accepting, I thought, but there's some folks who were pretty hostile.
But I wasn't relaxed when I had those children in the nursery.
Those 3 black kids in the nursery.
At Wells, I knew I can bring them. I had 2 places with my involvement that I could be myself. Was Wells Church, and when I drove through the gate at Tougaloo.
So it was like a little enclave at Tougaloo that you felt safe in.
Yeah.
Even so, not at night. My kids will tell you, oh, mother put us always to bed and say you rest us. I had to have my naps because at night you semi had to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our house was not bombed in 1974 when I had Pamela, a foster child, and the crucifixion, the cross was burned just across from our house on the football field.
I see.
And things. So it was relaxed and it was a community to that we could stick, but it wasn't totally a safe haven. I mean, you had to be cautious.
Yeah, you would not have felt you could live outside of the community at Tougaloo.
Oh, no, they didn't advise us at all. Even the blacks. It was considered a communist nest. And the black were a target as well as the whites. And Brett died, he even wanted to take the charter away from Tougaloo and all this.
Yeah, there was an effort by state government to remove the college's charter.
And you saw when you said he signs a statement, how many were pressured or just felt, and I don't blame them, their wives, they have children, they couldn't take that issue, and had to leave the state for whatever personal reason or pressure or what, to function. And it was hard.
Of the 28 who signed, I think there were 28 who signed the statement of conviction. I think 4 stayed.
I believe that's correct. It was similar numbers,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
sure.
So, and then
When I talked with Keith, he said that he signed it with one stipulation, that he wanted everybody to make a commitment to stay in Mississippi. And that lasted for a while, but not very long.
you had
Well, I think most of them had that intention, but
Yeah.
You had to be strong, and I don't blame anybody. Just think when you were young, married, and children, and your wife couldn't take it, and the kids couldn't take it. And then the in-laws and their own parents. I mean, John's parents were scared, and I tried not to tell everything my parents so far away. It was not easy. I mean,
Well,
You can go shopping, or we went to Shawnee's. I remember that so funny. Shawnee Family Restaurant, of course. I had a biracial child. And we had a table. And this biracial child called me Mama Garner. I always taught them when they get adopted, so Mama Garner, Daddy Garner. And when she sat on the lap of the black student, who could have been her mother, she called her Joanne. Across from us were two white Southern ladies. And Stephen pointed out, he was then about 12, 13. This is actually funny, Mommy. They can't even eat their baked potatoes. They're just looking at us. all. And we just were mature enough, but the surrounding of the Shawnee people, what in the world is going on, you know? Or I was stopped when I had a black woman in the car trying to get food stamp or social security or something, you know. You never knew when somebody snapped.
yeah.
The
And
shopping at Sears was an interesting story.
But Wells Church was really, honestly, I didn't feel there were people, what I call back talking behind my back or Keith's back. The children, I felt very safe with Charlie Beecham's wife. She was a Sunday school teacher, and she had to have patience with the oldest one who was retarded and crying, you know. And more they helped me, as I say, out. It was, I think that's what Keith's leadership brought in, a kind of extended family. I think that was Wells. And even now, when you hear and listen to transition, I see we are all pilgrim. We are walking our life. You are at this place, you are at this place or that place, in your belief or non-belief. But Keith doesn't make distinction. You're a better Christian than he or she or so on. At least that's what I experience, you know. Right now I'm not going anymore that much to church. For some reason I'm not quite needing it, or in a different place.
The sense of welcoming, a kind of a relaxed sense, maybe. You mentioned that it didn't matter how you were dressed when you went to Wells. It didn't matter where you lived. This general relaxed atmosphere, do you think that was all a part of the reason that a lot of people sought out Wells as opposed to some other religious communities?
Yes, and I can speak for the last few years. I remember I tried, maybe you have heard this through interviews, one time was a big issue, should Wells stay where it is? And this white guy came and kind of made a study, you know, should we stay and not stay, and how should we adjust and all that. It was very scientifically, in a way, done. But then once that process was over, I'm sure Keith can tell you what process it was, I forgot. That was so positive, that's where we're going. Not, oh, maybe we should have. You know, always not one leg back. No, that's where we're going and we're moving forward. There was, different issues. Operation Shoestring we started and then moved, you know. We did different things. And now again, I think the last 2-3 years in a different things, and stages of moving. It's not because of Keith's illness or so on. And I think it's healthy. If we would always remain where we are as a church or as a human being, then we die, and so on, in my opinion. And so
you think the church clarified for itself what its mission was, and that was important to the whole
community surrounding. I try to think, our kids, they must have been in college. They went a part of it when that study was done, and group sessions and all that, you know, that you could freely express yourself. And then my thing is, the biggest involvement really Welsh Church did when Katrina came through. That was a major thing.
Yeah, I was pretty active in you know.
Would you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, you know, Wells adopted an area on the coast, Burlington, I think that was the name of it, and
Perkinston?
No?
No?
no,
No, okay.
Burlington, I think was the name of this.
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, and we went various places, but I think the church did. But and Bruce Reynolds would be the person who really kept up with that and knows the details of that kind of stuff. But I think there were, that I participated in, 12 to 14 trips to the coast to do, you know, to help the people in rebuilding their homes. And that was you know, because that would be an all-day trip or an overnight trip, mostly overnights, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You went down on maybe late Friday, and then you worked all day Saturday, and you came back on Sunday, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing was, somebody down, it was well organized. They knew what equipment they had to bring, who and where to go. And other denomination, other churches from other part of the countries chose thing out. It was really well organized. And I think through that, when I look back, John, you could know again camaraderie.
Oh, sure.
I don't think you would have gotten Bruce Reynolds, so well known, and Keith
Mays.
Keith Mays,
Yeah.
and other people. And then, of course, with the church, we went involved the New Mexico trip.
Mexico. You know, they kind of there was a mission trip, an annual summer, if I remember right, mission trip to a town in Mexico. They I don't know, you have to talk to other people about that, because we didn't do it, but it was maybe 10 or 15 years they went down every year.
They built a clinic, and then stores on, and very active was Jeff Parker was organizing, and now they organizing, I think, something. They looked at Haiti, and something else. Now you see how, as I said, it evolves, it moves.
I see, yeah. John, the involvement with Katrina, does that in any way chime with your experience in Tanganyika?
I guess maybe so. I hadn't thought about that.
You talked about it as a work camp.
Yeah.
That's basically what you were doing on the coast, was helping to rebuild.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that connection, but I think maybe it was in the same general area, the same general type of work, and it kind of came from, you know, my home life in Wilmette. I mean, you know, helped your father with various projects around the house, right? And doing things, and gardening, and so I don't know that I would say that I'm very skillful, but I was certainly comfortable with using tools, and you know, those were the days when I could climb on the roof and help measure for the, you know, help put that plywood up there, and help measure for them to cut pieces of plywood. And I learned how to run the saws.
And, my wife doesn't want me to get up on the roof anymore.
I don't know if my wife wanted me to get up the roof.
Now I don't have to worry you getting up. There. Yeah.
Well, we have been going at it for quite a long time now, so I think...
Yeah, maybe we have wanted them maybe too much.
Well, you know, we go where it goes. And, are there any things that you would like to add? I know I haven't asked all the right questions, but things that are on your mind or that
I think
concern you?
my mind is we have again, and I haven't expressed a concern to the others, is following. We have an older congregation, and getting young people in with children that don't come from that neighborhood is still an issue. Race still does matter. And those things we have to be aware. What does that do? We have youth, when you realize our 3 grandsons are white, and then the 2 white from McWillie, but the rest neighborhood boys. So how is Wells going to financially, realistically going to go through the next step? And unless we really starting to be open-minded, I have seen some signs like bringing some Millsap students in, you know, but it is a serious concern.
I think as far as Wills is concerned, I guess the Christ and Culture class is very important to me. That Sunday school class where we study books in our own slow pace, but we also talk about whatever happens to be on our mind in terms of what's happening in the outside world. And I have an interest in starting to go to the council and board meetings on a more regular basis. Part of that may have come because our oldest grandson has been on the council, and he's taken a pretty strong leadership position in the church. He was the youth representative on the used to be called the Parish Pastor Relations Committee, now called the staff Parish Relations Committee or something. And I'd like to learn more about the finances of the church, I think. So that may be, and I'm doing some tutoring there through Wells. You know, they have a book buddy program.
I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it's a program where the church has arranged for Galloway School, which is right across the street from Wells, for members of the church to go and read for an hour a week with a student. To keep the same student. It's called, and you're called a book buddy with that student. I'm doing that, and kind of as an outgrowth of that, there is I've kind of become aware of the fact that, also through the grandchildren, aware of the need for some help with math. So I'm currently going on Wednesday afternoons to help out with, I think there's a guy named Bob Boltler, I believe his name is, from a different church, who is bringing some young men, they've all been men, for help with their math. And I joined that group recently. And there's one student from who comes to Wells regularly, and he and I are working on math during the church hour on Sunday morning. We have been doing that for a few weeks. So these are my current activities with Wells.
I see. Mm-hmm.
But then you must realize with the finance, and also our son, he was taught, he went not to the Tuesday group, and now he's no more with the Tuesday feeding, you know. Tuesday morning people come and get food and so on, and he saw a little bit one should approach it differently, and they haven't worked this all out. But keys always has nothing to do with money. Money, forget it. Logic, forget it. You know, he has his philosophy, where is God's will, cause, you find some money. But then when you have books, also even CPA guys and all, they say, oh, our blood is boiling, or this is it. Oh, we are in black. You know, you are only black because you borrowed from the fund that you sold the house that we used to have on the Methodist Road. Yeah, how can you say you're operating in black when you borrow, you know? And
it's like Bobby Jindal financing.
And somehow, maybe Keys's relaxation phase, or whatever you want to call, wrapped up on the finance committee. I do not know. I don't make judgment. It's just that they seem comfortable. To me, if Aaron or one of my grandsons say, "Oh, gosh, I have plenty of money. I just need to borrow $1," I said, you know, so borrowed, then you're not. So that's why I say we really have to start, not to panic, but to gain a solid inner evaluation. What is possible? And then make a clear decision. That's a route we all agree to go, and then wealth survives. Not just, you know, basically. Then we can still be a vibrant church as we are now, with Wellsfest, with also different activity
Yeah,
and
Wellsfest
everything.
is another thing happened. I helped when I was stronger. I was more involved with Wellsfest in terms of setting up stuff and staying afterwards and taking down and all that. I still enjoy Wellsfest, go to Wellsfest. I'm now in ticket sales. Before I was in pony rides, but that's just been very meaningful.
It sounds to me as if the ideal of service is what has driven you most of your life.
I think you might say that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think Margrit too. I mean,
I'm sure
she's made a reference to the many foster kids. She hasn't talked about her.
He has Mr. resume, he can read.
His,
I couldn't accept poverty. In Europe, I don't know how in England, but in a university when I grew up, the surrounding is well financially all. Here I come to Tugul, nothing but poverty. We didn't even have school compulsory law. I started the first federal funded daycare center, brought $28 million to Mississippi and all that, and the struggle of regulation. Then because I saw foster care kids, the black kids got not the treatment as survived, longer in care, I could not accept that. Then I worked for 10 years for Children's Defense Fund, and then I started my own agency, and then they thought I had breast cancer, so we quickly stopped everything, and turned out I'm fine. So, you know, yes, it was a service for a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that if Wells has in any way helped to support that effort on your part, I think it's well worth it.
well, I think it's been kind of. Well, you have to speak for yourself. Did Wells play any role in that, or?
I guess so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know me, where, as I say, right now, things are moving in Jackson in such different ways that I am starting to look at other ways to be involved.
Yeah.
And, but
She's quite active in her neighborhood.
but the larger, not just, they looking now at what they call super neighborhood. that they would involve churches, business people, all, to really a kind of, what kind of community do we want? We have no more villages like you American used to have, you know, and we in Europe. But they starting to realize we can't copy that old picture. Grandmama is not there, and the uncle is not up the road, and the auntie and all. But somehow, they call it the super.
So forging new social connections that will
Yeah.
substitute for the lost ones.
Because then when you really, the church has ceased, the school has ceased, and you come together and say what kind, and not just small community, they talking, for instance, larger, for instance, one would be from West Highway 55 all the way to Beasley Road, Briarwood up, to really see and then be structured. And then already it starts a little bit with the infrastructure, if I want to go in political. The city council is not going to make the decision about our infrastructure. It's a committee that always look. And we citizens, they have a web page. We must give input what we think should happen. Now, if you don't have a coordination, and somebody says, I want this street and I want that street, you know. So you need to bring people together and educate. So much money, setting priority. Here is the ladder, the first year here, second, you know. And that has not gone on in Jackson. And I think we at Wells Church need to start like we did years ago, made a conscious decision through a study and all. I really think we need to do that.
It has been done some places in Jackson, like I think the Bellhaven neighborhood is pretty well organized.
They are Fondren.
Fondren is well organized.
There's another one.
Yeah, those are the two that come to my mind, but I think that what Margrit is talking about is identifying a region and then trying to bring together what they call the stakeholders, you know, the churches. We have this little neighborhood association here, but it's a very small neighborhood, and it's only has a very minor impact. But if we can maybe, and it's just people, you know, from the neighborhood, a few of us. But this vision of super neighborhoods is to identify somewhat larger regions like Bellhaven or Fondren that have an identity, and then involve the various organizations within that, the churches, the businesses, the people themselves, in trying to create some kind of structure that helps them relate to each other and identify common needs.
They also would have a 501c3 that with finance and all. Now,
And
when
also
you are
maybe-
through, I want to ask you then a question. Credit union, you are still with the credit?
I am.
I read a while back, and while I was sitting here, I said, where is that sheet of paper? They started some new way that, okay, I get some money, but I'm going to deposit maybe for $5. I don't just take a loan out or so on. That teaching people to save, to build up, and this came from some credit unions in this country. They implementing some of this stuff. Have you heard about any of that?
We do a lot of work with individuals teaching to save.
But not set up that I would say, okay, I don't know, you give me a credit for, how do you give credit? For buying a house, or do I meet my loan, or how does...
Credit from a credit rating agency. So one of the things we do is we have different loan products for building people's credits. So we have, should we finish this?
Yeah.
So we're on-
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Fair
think
enough.
that would be a good idea.
Yep.
Let me just, before we stop the tape, though, thank you, Margaret and John, for giving us
Sure.
so much of your time and
Thank you for your interest
sharing
in
sharing
talking-
your opinions and,
Yeah.
and your
talking-
knowledge. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. Close it. Yeah.